Okay, so we'll let you guys just take it away.
Okay. Hi. Well, welcome to this presentation, and sorry that we've been a little bit disjointed this morning, but I'm really glad that you came. And so I'm Anastasia Tarmann at the Alaska State Library. I work in the historical collections, and I am the Alaska's National Digital Newspaper Program Project Director. And then I'll let Shawn introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I am the project director for the National Digital Newspaper Program at Washington State, and now working on running our Washington Digital Newspapers Program through some separate funding, which we'll talk about in a moment. But I have been working on the project Digital Newspapers Program for about 10 years now, and I'm happy to share some of my experiences with Anastasia today and the group.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, but I can always benefit from your experience too, Shawn. So next slide. We are both project directors of our state programs, as we mentioned, and or Shawn has been in the past. And together we have considerable experience with this program. And so we're experienced consulting with libraries and historical cultural institutions on digital projects. And so we wanted to just explain a little bit about the program, and I'll go into some more details in a minute. So the National Digital Newspaper Program is sponsored by the funders NEH, National Endowment for the Humanities, and also IMLS, which Shawn will talk about. Library of Congress gives technical support to the project.
And the library, the Institute of Museum and Library Services is not part of the National Digital Newspaper Program, but it is another federal funding organization that helps us digitize newspapers in Washington State and provide information that we can share with our respective states.
Okay, next slide. So the reason we wanted to do this presentation, and we have doubled up on presentations before for the Washington State Libraries, we want to explain how the NDNP is so much more than digitizing newspapers, and we want to help libraries understand digital projects, and we're interested in creating a hub for digital projects to share knowledge across the state. Particularly I am across this state, to avoid redundancy and also to provide resources and expertise to each other. So we get questions from libraries and museums often, and they want to understand how to start digital projects and how to make them more manageable. So we'd like to share practical takeaway resources you can apply to preserving and sharing your collections. But we'll also talk about this project and how it works. And we're going to share how the NDNP projects have given us experience in managing large and small projects. So we're going to do a bit of explaining the program, and then also demoing Chronicling America, and showing you what the connection is between Chronicling America and the National Digital Newspaper Program, and also the just digital projects in general. So we so I seem to have lost my slide.
in general, yeah, we've been talking this morning so much about it. Yeah, we've
exactly.
got some demos and some action items for you, things to consider in your projects.
Yeah, and basically we wanted to make clear the connection between the National Digital Newspaper Program, Chronicling America, and the Alaska State Library's Digital Historic Newspapers Program, because you may have heard about one or all of these, but maybe didn't know that they were connected. And so we want to explain about those, and then also introduce some practical considerations for digital projects, as Shawn was mentioning. And then we hope by the end of the presentation that you know how the Alaska State Library and the Washington State Library tie in with NDNP, National Digital Newspaper Program, and why the program is important to our states. And we really want to invite you to consult with us regarding newspaper digital projects and other digital projects. So we'll spend a little time on each project, and starting with background information about the NDNP and a demo of Chronicling America, highlighting Alaska titles so that you know what we've been doing. And following that, we'll touch on digital projects, access, and preservation. And then finally, at the end, we'll take your questions.
So we'd like to give you kind of an overview of what NDNP is. And you hear us say NDNP a lot because it's a lot to say National Digital Newspaper Program and the Alaska National Digital Program participation and Washington, et cetera. So, you know, we end up using a lot of our own acronyms about the newspapers. But needless to say, this program, sponsored by the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Library of Congress, has been around for over 10 years. We in Washington started in 2008, but the program has actually been around since about 2005. So it's been around for a while. And, you know, most of the 50 states are participating, all but one or two, and we're trying to get those states on board now. So all the states and a few territories have been invited to participate in this program. NEH provides the funding for a 2-year grant cycle. And we apply, and then with that 2 years, we have time to select the titles that we feel are historically important. They are titles that are in the public domain, which means, you know, they're early enough that we can use them for a lot more than, you know, we still have to look at copyright and those things for certain things. But there's only one state, one organization per state that is invited to participate through this grant. And NEH wants us to become local experts in the digitization of newspapers and preservation of newspapers, so we can be a resource to our organizations, our state and cultural communities, and their projects too. So with all those states and territories, you know, we have a pretty good supply of newspapers by now in Chronicling America, which is the website hosted by Library of Congress.
And we'll show you that. And the Library of Congress gives us technical support, and we work with them to submit 10 batches of 100,000 pages. And Library of Congress helps us meet their standards to be sure that the papers will be searchable, and also that they will be preserved for as long as we know they can be preserved. So,
and they also encourage us to do a cultural, contextual newspaper essay about each title, so we can learn the history and provenance of the newspaper. And then we also do a non-NDNP survey, which allows us to figure out like what other state digitization projects are happening out there, so we can have as much of a resource and understanding of digital projects that are free and accessible to the public.
Right, and this is one reason we want to connect with you too, to see what you are working on. So, and also, I just wanted to let you know that we started a title essays working group last year, where we started to look at race and ethnicity in our title essays. So thinking about the kind of language that we're using, but also it struck many of us that these we were thinking a lot about who's running these newspapers, who was running those newspapers, who's running them now. Our groups, all ethnic groups being represented, they're being represented well. So what's the historical context that we can provide moving forward, you know, and do our part too. So why the program exists and who does it benefit? Basically, the program exists to preserve newspapers and allow and provide access to them to a wide, you know, number of researchers, educators, and communities. And so we want to talk about how we're localizing the program and how it applies to Alaska libraries. Alaska State Library, by the way, is about to apply for our 4th cycle. We started in 2016 and were successfully awarded our first grant then. So to talk about the history of the program, so first there was an NEH first attempted to help states preserve their newspapers by microfilming all of the issues. And so some of you may remember that Alaska was gathering all the issues of all the known issues of all the known titles and was madly microfilming all of those issues in maybe the 1980s through the 1990s. And then, of course, everyone wants their papers digitized now. One other reason for that is to be able to use the data on the backside, but we won't talk about that today. But so since this newspapers are already on microfilm, then you know, we can now really concentrate on trying to get as many newspaper voices heard on Chronicling America. Just to show you a little bit about what Alaska's been doing, I think we may have more than 35 different Alaska titles uploaded now. But there, you know, we have been steadily working towards 65 titles, and our geographic coverage is for at least 22 different cities and towns, all the way from Seward to Nome. So our goal is to meet 300,000 pages by September of 2022. And these are places that I think we might have a couple more to add since the slide was made, but these are, we're trying to get a wide geographic and political and ethnic representation. So, and other special groups. So then now we're going to demo Chronicling America. We have as a nation, we have over 18 million newspaper pages in this database. And nationally, we have at least 48 states and 2 territories participating in the program. So now, oh, Shawn's on the, she's going to give you a little demo of the National Digital Newspaper Program page.
Yeah, so I'm just showing the main page. The awards page is what I just moved over to, just to kind of give you an idea of like all the different projects that are being worked on right now. So if you've got some national research to do, you could see like, you know, the different states and how long they've been participating. And each of these states also comes up with a variety of programs that they like to show how they're using the data. And so one of the main pages, let me go back to the beginning here. So this page is the home page, and you can learn more about the program, and you can see the guidelines and resources, pardon me,
that we use. These are the technical guidelines that we use. So the digitization standards and the metadata standards that we use. Go ahead, Shawn.
Okay. So you'll see that all the criteria that we have to deal with, these are all the things that we have to learn to participate in the program. So these are the things that help us understand projects that we can simplify and kind of condense down for our local community projects. You can see some program news. And then, of course, one of the things that NEH really likes us to do, and we encourage people to ask us about this, is so we can share the educational resources that come up about this. So
I spend a lot of time developing these resources, and there's some really excellent ones from the different member states as well on here. Lesson plans and all kinds of teaching resources.
yep, teaching resources here, lesson plans, so you can find them pretty easily on the main NDNP site.
There's
Pardon?
that one edu site is up there.
And then
too.
also, yeah, so not on this page, but a separate page, and we'll have a little note about it in a bit. NEH has their own teaching and education site as well. So please share with your teacher librarians the fact that there are lesson plans, teacher guides, and media resources. This is a great page that you can go and explore. But you know, this is a great primary resource. And so we really hope that you'll explore these more too after our session today. And then also the prime event here, I'll just head on over to Chronicling America itself. So this is our goal. This is like all the work that we do, we contribute, gets posted to this website.
Yeah, so now we're going to give you a little demo, starting maybe with, so you see the U.S. newspaper directory. We don't need to go there, but that will.
We can. We have the power. we can do it.
Yeah, Library of Congress logs all of, they are trying to log all of the U.S. newspapers into this catalog, it's a great resource. And then back to all digitized newspapers, maybe, so that we can show you how to get to the Alaska papers specifically. And then you can see the titles that have been uploaded by, you want to go.
Yeah, my screen was in the way. My videos were in the way. Fun with Zoom with one screen.
Yeah, it's sort of like, you know, like which hand is doing, like, are you my hand, you're my hand.
I'm your hands for now.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, so you can see the date range, and then you know, if you click on yes, then you will see more info. You can talk about it too, Shawn, if you want to.
Yeah, well, this is one of my favorite parts, because this is where we get to show off the essays that we work on. It shows you all the publication information from Library of Congress. So we submit the cataloging information off to Library of Congress, and it goes with each newspaper to talk about the frequency and the publishers and any succeeding or related titles. But here you can really learn a lot about the newspaper itself. This is a great primary resource. We put a lot of research into these essays, and so it's a great way to not only learn about the paper and who owned it, but it puts it into context of, you know, when the paper was written and the community around it that influenced the paper, and how the paper influenced the community as well.
Yes, and we're finding out about, you know, a lot of political figures owned these newspapers. Former governors started papers in Alaska, and they'd had particular agendas, and then they're just some wacky characters too. It's just fun to read about. And also some, you know, if you look at the Socialist Press, for example, you'll find out some information about one of the leading feminists and socialists at the time. So we try to pack the essays full of interesting details and not just about the paper themselves. You can also search by the calendar view. So you see that we've got the date range there. And then Shawn is clicking on the calendar, so you could actually choose a particular date. So
there are two ways to get to the calendar view as well. So the way I just clicked on it from the list, and also if you go back to the original, you see the date range as mentioned. And if you click on the yes for the essay page, there's another calendar view down here too.
And you can see all the front pages too, if you would rather. Or you can just do an advanced, yeah. there's the calendar. Sorry, I'm bopping around.
Oh, that's all right. I'll keep up with you. Here's the front
Okay,
pages.
all the front pages, yep. Or if you want to search for a particular thing across all of the Alaska newspapers, you could do so, or Arizona.
Sorry, my videos are in the way. I'm trying to get to that here. Let's go to this one.
Yeah, like, so what were all the newspapers saying about, you know, the Iditarod during a certain time period? And you could,
Oops,
I mean, you could
wrong
search
keyboard
for
here.
something, I don't know, pirates, Iditarod. I don't know if there were pirates in Alaska.
Oh, sure there were. Of course there were.
Oh, I know.
Let's
Well,
search
anyway,
for Iditarod, I'm
depends
sure
on
is
your
a good
perspective
term.
who a pirate is. Okay, so yeah, so now you can see that your search word is highlighted there. And you can see all of the papers that had articles in Alaska that we have uploaded that talk about the Iditarod.
So I just double clicked on the page itself to open it up larger so we can see the single page and the terms are still highlighted. One thing to note here is you'll see a window of the whole page, but you'll also see controls on how to clip the page. You'll see a little scissor icon and the file types. You can go advance or you know, go back and forth on issues and different page counts. This is page 404.
If you get confused, you can just contact me or Christopher, our project coordinator. So it's almost 10:30, and so maybe we should move on to our next portion of the presentation.
Absolutely. Let's go back and get to our slide deck. And the next one is just a reminder that, you know, Ed Siteman is an option among the other teaching resources.
Okay. Now, so as we mentioned, we do a lot of consultations on digital newspaper projects and just digital projects in general. So we have a full-blown presentation on this topic on setting up a digitization project and making it sustainable and manageable. But we're just going to give you a little taste today. So basically, you know, we have this donation or this collection, and we don't exactly know how we're going to make it digitally accessible or even how to start with our project. So we're just going to talk about some of the things to think about, like the difference between digitization and preservation and why that's important, and, you know, how, you know, just really put some planning into how to organize your project. And something that we always try to think about is when we convert a tangible object like a newspaper into a digital facsimile, we need to give the history and context of that object. So in other words, it has certain qualities as well as the original object, and those qualities require maintenance and preservation, and so do the digital objects. So for this reason, we have digital standards. And if this isn't clear now, then we'll go into a few more details. So here's some topics that we'd like you to consider.
So we like to kind of talk about, I always talk about with my consulting, when I talk to people about a new project, I talk about 5 main points to consider with a digital project that are really good to think about before you engage in your project. And you know, we always talk about digitization versus digital preservation, which can really change the character of how you approach the project, and also the sustainability.
Yeah.
Yeah. So these components we'll talk a little bit more about, and a little bit about scope and management, because things like I mentioned to Anastasia, you know, I get somebody asking a question about, I want to do these papers and they want to scan from the dawn of time to the present. And so, you know, we really want to help you kind of keep these manageable, and also a little bit about next steps and how to really kind of like look at third parties and how to bring in help when you want to set up your project.
Yeah. And so, yeah, exactly. So, just deciding on the level of digital preservation that is right for your organization as well, so you can sustainably manage your project with confidence, is a goal of ours. And so in the next slide, we just have this kind of cool picture of the gnome nugget. And, newspapers are fragile. The paper's acidic. It's not meant to last. And the ink bleeds. And also, we want our papers to be accessible. And so that's why we embark on these projects, or, photographs or whatever it is. Okay, so digitization or preservation, and why the difference is so important to think about. So we're really thinking about sustainability and accessibility, but we often think about just accessibility and not in the long term. So we think about things like a PDF, or just do it quick and dirty. But are you sure that's what you want? I mean, that's what we want to ask. So for example, even in scanning, Library of Congress standards use high quality TIFF files, and that does create a storage problem, and we recognize that. But if we take steps to think about, how long do I want this project to last? How much effort do I want to put in it? If I put in a lot of effort, is it actually going to, is it going to disappear? Is it truly accessible to people? So, the metadata standards. So that means how we decide that we're going to describe these objects. If we do it in a way that is standardized, and we do it from the very beginning, then there's a better likelihood that that pile of shoes is, it's going to be organized. We're going to be able to locate the shoes we want, versus, like digging through this pile, and it, and eventually systems become obsolete, platforms go away, and a platform is basically software that we can upload all of our images to, so that people can get to them. Sometimes they go away, or we just have to think about these things and then have a plan, for how we're going to keep do our project most efficiently, because we're all short-staffed and we're all underfunded. So basically, and Shawn, did you want to add anything to that, to what I just
Yeah, and your conversation about short-term versus long-term, and the platforms that are used, and it's just kind of a given in our era that some platforms, software is going to come and go, and the best we can guarantee is that there will be a migration. There will be times when we have to transfer from one system to another. And one of the examples that we have is something that could happen someday. We hope it never does. But with our newspaper web hosting that we do, once we finish a program, a batch with Chronicling America, we have our own local website that we use, and it's hosted by a vendor that we really do like and we trust. But they've got a crowdsourced text correction feature that we love, and this is great. We take that OCR that we created from the National Digital Newspaper Program, and using their standards. OCR is the optical character recognition system that kind of scrapes up the texts and is what makes your program, your content, searchable. So with that searchable content, that OCR is an underlying file that always lives with that batch that we created with our national newspaper program using those Library of Congress standards, and that's great. But with this other platform, there's another layer that allows people to go in, and maybe the OCR wasn't very clean, it was a dark page or something, and so people can go in and correct that, and then that's another file. So if we leave that platform that text correction that people have done for us doesn't really get saved or integrated into a new system, but we haven't lost everything. We've got our image standards that are transferable, and we've got that metadata from Chronicling America that will be there with the files and the page images. So they're just things that we have to take into consideration when we're going and setting up these systems that make everything accessible and improve what we do have.
Yeah, and so let's talk about vendors. So the next slide is just to show you.
Before we get to talk about
okay.
vendors, though, there's a few things that we want to talk about in between.
Okay.
So before you even get to a vendor to talk about standards, you want to make sure you have a pretty good idea of what those standards are. I talked a little bit about the OCR, but it's that, kind of the sustainability and accessibility go together. And so we want to make sure that the efforts that you put into this, again, help that long term. And so those standards such as metadata, the Library of Congress uses a system like what we use for MARC in libraries. They have Metsalto standards that capture the structure and layout of the newspaper page that the computers can understand, so it's machine readable. But those image files that we use, when we get requests from communities about scanning, we also have to let them know that our choice for our program is 8-bit grayscale, uncompressed TIFFs for preservation, which is what the Library of Congress establishes. It creates a smaller file, so we have to consider file size. We have to consider where we're putting that. And then the JP2s for web versions, PDFs for download, printing clippings, we have to understand how people are going to use the pages that we scan and make sure that eventually we have to consider the copyright for those pages as well. Is it acceptable for anyone to use? Or do we have to make sure there's a copyright statement on our page that goes with that? Storage, if that file is so big, we decided not to do color for our page images because the files are just too big. Maybe, in a particular program, it makes more sense for you to use PDFs, but, we really don't consider that as the same preservation level as TIFFs. So you have to decide, is this your preservation collection or is this your accessibility collection that people can get to and use? And then with storage, you just want to make sure that you can talk about to the people who maybe are maintaining the storage, what they need to know if it's backed up, if you're talking to an IT person, or if it's storage, it's a small collection, you need to keep it on a hard drive. How are you making sure that hard drive stays working for a long time? And then like with us, we do web hosting, but once you have all those files created, how are you going to share them out to people and make them accessible? So have you thought about web hosting? Do you need to? Or can it be something that outsourced or somebody else already doing it? So these are the things that we want you to think about. And Anastasia, I'm sure you've got a few more things in here that you were thinking about too.
Well, that's, basically, this is why we want to communicate with you.
I ran through that really quickly too. So
yeah,
again, we want people to ask us questions about this.
Yeah.
So these are just teasers right now.
Yeah, and that's why, yeah, exactly. We invite you to, please contact us, and then the next thing we wanted to talk about is working with vendors. And so, a lot of us, maybe there's one person working in the library or two people working in the library. And so you think, okay, my community wants to digitize this project. And so I'm going to get a vendor. So, we're not going to tell you, what to do or, how, but we do have some suggestions for how you can go about getting a vendor you feel you can work with, and also setting up a contract that meets your needs, and you can be proactive about that. And so things to consider when working with vendors is, do they really understand this work that you need them to do? You get them to provide you with examples of projects, to explain the projects. And on that note too, are their soft skills good? Are they willing to explain the process, take the time necessary to teach you about what your project would consist of, give you the technical details and set realistic expectations? also, how do their costs compare with other organizations? And, do they really have a solid grasp of what they're talking about too? And are they willing to maybe, provide a little extra to you since we're in a remote place, maybe think about shipping costs and, think about, do they actually have a secure facility? Ask them about what it's like, so, and also the other thing is, are there licensing limitations? So I think that it's easy to get into a trap where, for example, they'll do all this digitizing for you, but actually they own the rights to the images. And so now they're privatized and very few people can have access to them. So you can negotiate that in your contracts. I mean, and if they're not willing to negotiate, maybe you might want to look for a different vendor. And then get it all in writing, because I actually have a great vendor, but they said they would pay for the shipping, and unless I had that in writing, then I would have, they would not have recognized that part of our contract. So okay. So,
Yeah, I was going to say, can I just add a little note about one of the things you pointed out about the licensing limitations?
yeah.
We're doing a new project, and this is the first year we're working on it with newspapers.com. And in some ways, it sounds like just kind of a wonderful way to get things scanned super quickly. So we're kind of cautiously going in, but we did really negotiate some of the things that we wanted to be sure of, like number of pages or which titles. For example, one of the things is part of their requirement is a 3-year embargo. So you really need to understand if a company, especially some of the larger companies, are doing a project with you, that who owns what and how it's to be used. So we've agreed with our program. Some of the titles are older; they're not as in high demand, but they're still have a great historical value. So we want to be able to make sure those are eventually accessible and have a digital footprint that we can put on our website. But it's going to be sitting for us for 3 years after it's scanned, because newspapers.com, they're going to make some products. They're going to make some educational resources that people can use as part of their subscription. But we've agreed that we'll hold on to these for a few years until we put them on our website. And so we're fine with that. Other organizations may not want to do that. They want things sooner, or, whatever the situation is, just make sure that you really ask those questions of the vendor. And that's where those soft skills come in. Is that vendor willing to answer those questions? Because you want to be really sure you understand what the contract is when you start your project.
And you can just start with, can explain to me how this all works, please. And I had Library of Congress as my technical source, but I also felt like my vendor really helped me understand the whole process, the whole project, and how the metadata works, and how, it's really nice when someone will just sit down with you and explain it all. Something that you reminded me of, Shawn, was that sometimes you don't even need to go through this process. Maybe we have already digitized something, or maybe we already have the microfilm, or just check with us. That's one of the reasons I really wanted to do this presentation. And then funding that you're able to obtain on a local level. We have a cap on our program. Something we didn't mention is that we can only go up to 1963 with this project. So anything beyond 1963, we just cannot add to Chronicling America at this point. And so because of copyright restrictions. So that would be a wonderful opportunity for a community to pick up where we left off and digitize the newspapers from 1963 on. So,
Yeah.
okay, now
And
we
when-
have a few minutes for questions. Yeah, did you want
I was
to
just going to say a couple of things for clarification that just occurred to me. And the copyright status that I mentioned, I quickly created a little sheet of resources that we are happy to send out to people. But the copyright, the 1963 is where the copyright laws change. Pretty much everything was at before 1926 right now is in the public domain, the way the copyright laws are written. But the things between that date and 1963 may be, as long as the newspaper publisher didn't renew the copyright. So that little bit that Chronicling America now lets us digitize is with the caveat that we've thoroughly researched that title to make sure there's no copyright on it. And the other thing that I wanted to mention too is about the source. We talk about microfilm a lot, and just a little clarification that might not have been obvious earlier. We talk about the microfilm because when we do the scanning, the cost associated with scanning from a microfilm master negative is far lower than if you try to scan the newspaper from its original print page. And so that's something that we also talk to and consult with our communities about, is that price difference. Because, for example, I'm working with one community in Washington, Kashmir, and the Kashmir Valley Record, they wanted to scan from print, even though there was microfilm available. But for us, you're talking about the difference of maybe something like 7 cents a page as compared to like 40 cents or more per page of scanning from microfilm to print. And we use the microfilm master negative just because it's a cleaner copy than if you were to use the positives and the service copies that we typically have in our buildings. So those are the kind of differences of looking at the source. And again, that's another example of the things that we can help guide you through if you're looking at setting up a project.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, actually. I wasn't going to bring up that part about copyright, but I think that's important to think about, and maybe not everyone's thinking about that. And yes, it is, also with that 6 cents per page or whatever it is, we get the OCR and the metadata embedded, but we do need to do the work on the metadata. So these are the kinds of things that you may not think about, when you're setting up your project, how it all works. So anyway, should we, here's some outreach resources. Shawn, thank you so much for,
I think you might want to mention these because they're great resources.
Thank you for creating that resource on copyright for people. And then these are resources for the Alaska digital newspaper program. And, you can actually see him in the background. Christopher, do you want to turn around?
Hi, Chris.
I'd love for you to meet our project coordinator, Christopher. He is the one who is putting up the majority of blog posts and Instagram, and he's also doing all of the technical work. So he's really important, very, very, very important. I just talk and he does the work. So thanks, Christopher. Okay. Yeah, so please ask questions. We're happy to answer any questions in the time we have left.
And I'd say if people want to turn on their mic, we'd love to hear your voices, know that there's somebody out there.
Yeah, it's a small group, so feel free, just jump in.
What vendor were you talking about that does the crowdsourcing text correction?
So that's a vendor we have. They're called DL Consulting, and their product's called Veridian. And I know that the California Digital Newspapers Program and a few others use it as well. And so that allows us to, I can show you a quick little image of it, but that allows us to show the newspaper in a way that it's searchable similarly to Chronicling America, but it has that crowd text correction feature, if I can say that 5 times fast. Let me see if I can do a quick little share of, actually we'll go back to that. I think it's up online here. It doesn't let me tab to new pages very easily. Here we go. So this is my copying. So this is where the handout I mentioned on copyright is something that we put on our about page. But everything that we do in Washington State for Chronicling America eventually goes to our locally hosted webpage. And just for the record, you know, Anastasia's position that allows her to do this is part of her other regular duties as a Alaska State Librarian. And for me, this is a full-time project. So it allows us to do a few other things. But similarly, we can, you know, can search titles and we can search dates and subjects. So the Veridian piece allows it to display nicely, that people have that search feature. And then at the bottom of our page, we've got our top text correctors here, that people can do a friendly competition against each other, or just, you know, topics they feel passionate about. A lot of times people come in and have a family genealogy project, and they'll correct names and that sort of thing.
Cool, thank you.
Thanks for asking a question, Sarah. Good to see you here. Anybody have anything else? I mean, feel free to share about a project too, or ask questions about, I know we touched on various aspects of the project.
Yeah. Is there anything else that people would like to see more detail of, or we went through a lot of things really quickly?
Yeah.
So Anastasia, were there some other things that you think people would like to see?
Would you like to see what our blog actually looks like, or our?
Yeah, I would.
Okay.
I haven't seen it. we have another, you know, 5 minutes or so. So yeah, please, this is the time to do it.
Yeah,
I will stop sharing this.
Okay. Do you want you, or you could just go to that slide that has the blog if you want.
Oh, right. Okay.
Click on the link. Yeah. Well, thanks for this opportunity to talk to you too. We hope that this was useful to you. We would love some feedback.
I keep doing the wrong keyboard here. I've got two computers in front of me.
Thanks, Robin. Robin, was there anything in particular that was helpful, or do you want us to elaborate on anything, or?
No, that's okay. I was just interested in hearing about the project. I worked one of my first jobs when I came to work at Rasmussen was working for the Bibliography of Alaska, and we were doing a lot of indexing, and usually of magazines, but we did do some, you know, newspaper type things as well.
Oh, that's great. Actually, I'd love to hear what brought the rest of you to this presentation. Anybody else want to volunteer? Thanks,
So
Robin.
folks, if they don't have a mic, they can also enter their comments in the chat.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, Shawn, in the meantime,
Sarah.
Great.
Oh, sorry. This is Sarah and Ingrid. I was just interested to see what Alaska's role in this project was. Our director is interested in, I mean, digitizing, I think, all newspapers, but that's kind of a heavy lift. So I'm just trying to figure out what is my starting point, and what's already been done and what maybe cannot be done. And I'm also interested in digitally preserving our municipal publications. They've been born digital since about, I want to say 2011, but all of the municipal publications before that are still in paper. And it's the library's responsibility to maintain those for a reference collection. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, where do I start that project? So yeah, this was really helpful. Thank you.
So Anastasia, this is
Oops.
But we were exactly what we were talking about, because it's good to know who else is planning digital projects, because that's kind of our mission too, is to digitize all the titles available. But, and where do you start? But we know that there are certain papers that are at risk, and other communities that's their primary goal. So yeah.
Yeah, actually, I muted myself, so I didn't talk over you, Shawn, actually. Yeah, no, great, Sarah. I hope you contact me and we can talk more about what you'd like to do. I did have someone up in Moose Pass contact me a couple of years ago, and we actually did not have all of the issues that she had found, and she had been embarking on her own project, and then she found out about us, and so it was mutually beneficial. But Sarah, I would be happy to help you set up, talk about both projects that you want to do.
This is Rose. I'm at the National Park Service here in Anchorage, and I came mostly because I was curious to see how the project was progressing, and I didn't know about the 1963 kind of cutoff, but I'm curious about any outreach that you're doing to existing publications, or publications that are still being published that have earlier versions that are after 1963, if you're working with them to get some of those papers digitized, especially because that's where we will find things in communities that aren't necessarily represented in the kind of the larger newspapers of the days.
Yeah, so do you have an idea of how, what would that look like to you? What would that kind of outreach look like to you?
Yeah, I guess it would be approaching if it's still being published, it would be looking at the websites of those publications and then contacting the current publishers about some sort of a partnership, because I'm thinking like there's like the worker type publications or foreign language publications where it might be just contacting the publishers and getting those kinds of permissions if they don't already have their publications online. And especially, 1963 as a cutoff. Well, 1964, then we have a big change in Alaska and Anchorage after the quake, and lots of needs for people to reach out. And that's where a lot of the research is happening, or has been happening. So, but I think, I guess that's my thought, is to reaching out to current publishers.
Yeah. Anastasia, do you mind if I answer this one?
No, I don't mind.
This is what I do frequently. So here in Washington State, since this is my full-time job, is consultation with those communities and publishers. So we are a member of the Washington Digital Newspaper Publishers Association. So I work really hard to build a relationship with publishers. Some publishers really don't want to share their back archive. Some do. When I work with communities, the way we're set up, so this IMLS funding through the Librarian Services and Technology Act allows me to go out and talk to people about digitizing their community paper, how they might go about fundraising, all those bits I'd mentioned about, storage and scope, and making sure that people understand standards, and of course copyright, because that is a big one. And so I encourage the communities to reach out to the publisher first, because I just think it's a better community approach to it. And so usually I get here from like a museum or another cultural institution, and it's like, hey, we want to digitize all these files. And so I talk to people about maintaining the scope, like a test, some sort of a pilot program, because that can also help them with fundraising. But in general, I have a pretty good relationship with the publishers. And once I know the community has reached out, then I reach out to the publishers and let them know if they have any questions about what we're doing with those scans, what we're doing with that metadata, and where it's going. I can answer those questions. So I think it's really important to let the publishers know that we are digitizing for preservation, because many want to monetize their collection and they have every right to do so. So we want to let them know we don't have any interest in competing with them. And then so that we start that conversation kind of gradually that way. And generally we'll have pretty good conversation about what it is, but we also have that website where we host what we digitize for those communities. So that's something I don't know. Do you have that hosting in mind, or do you have a web platform set up already?
Are you asking me, or are you asking?
No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rosemary,
was that your question?
No, this isn't in the realm of what I do for my work, but
Okay.
from a researcher perspective, thinking about the difficulty of researching some of that mid-century material.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's something that you can directly approach the publisher. If you're just doing copyright research permission, then yeah, when we post everything up on our website, we also try to make sure that we connect the researcher to the publisher for those questions.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking that some of those smaller publishers probably, they might not even have some of that material, and they likely won't have it digitized. So I'm thinking that is a place for partnerships in the future. Again, it's not what I do, but it's something that would be really great to see.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I understand that. And probably, Anastasia, does NDNP, the Library of Congress folks, ever contact you about copyright of something because they're not sure about a specific publication? I mean, sometimes I know that not what we contribute to Chronicling America, but sometimes there might be something from the U.S. newspaper directory that somebody asks about, and then Library of Congress will refer them to me. It's rare, but it does happen.
Yeah, no, we haven't had that, but we did have an interesting situation where we had a copyright clearance, but we want to work sensitively with the community, and it's we just want to make sure that we respect their desire to. I mean, it's an ownership question. So they actually own the paper, but they don't own the copyright. So, but, I think, just broadly, the way I respond to your suggestion, Rose, is I have worked with publishers, but it's been kind of an, sort of serendipitous way. And one thing that I've decided that I need to do, and is to be really intentional about contacting communities and contacting publishers. We have two people, and I'm really only supposed to be giving 15% of my time, and I have so many other projects, and so I have tried to figure out how to do this in a way that I could actually physically do. But I think that's really, I think it's important to contact those communities and let them know, hey, we have these papers published up to 1963. Is there, because often publishers are really interested in getting their paper digitized. So I think it's a great suggestion, and something that I'm working on. And having this presentation is part of it. And I really wanted Shawn to be a part of it because she has so much experience working directly with communities, because that's a big part of her job. So
yeah, I'm more than happy to answer questions. So if you know someone who needs help or is interested in starting a project, if Anastasia is wrapped up then, just feel free to email both of us or just me, or, I'd
I
always
wanna
check with
be in on the
Anastasia.
loop.
I was gonna say, I was always contact Anastasia though, to check in with what projects are happening in Alaska. But if it's a general question, I'm more than happy to answer those.
Yeah.
So
Thanks,
I think
Shawn.
we're at time. We're at 12:05. We
We-
got, there's a lot of information there. So
Yeah.
um,
Thank you
Okay.
so much for coming and for asking questions and talking about your own projects and giving suggestions is really great. My only regret is that I can't see any of you, but maybe next time. So, okay, feel free to contact us. Thank you so much, Julie and Shawn. Oh, good. Yay. Hi.
hey, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. I'm sorry I have my mask on, but it's great to see you.
And we'll be doing
Okay.
this project also for the museums in November. Is that correct? So we'll have one more similar presentation
We
for if
will.
you know people who are interested in seeing it live. It'll happen in November. Same channel.
No, December 7th.
December. That's right.
Yeah, we
we're
changed it.
another.
And then
Okay.
we're also going to ramp it up a lot on the digital projects part, like how to actually set up your projects and what can be done with this program as far as using the data, digital humanities. That's going to be for the ACLA conference, so the Alaska Library Association conference. But I'm happy to do another presentation and tailor it to exactly what you're interested in, do a workshop. Shawn might be interested in coming along. So great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording.